Okay, hello everybody. Now we are in the feedback session where we're going to hear from one rapporteur from each of our 11 feedback groups on their discussions today. Each rapporteur is asked to give us between 3 and 5 key findings on their group's discussion on the very important topic of gender equality in the workplace. We're recording this feedback session so that it will be available on the website. And first of all, I'd like to thank those of you who volunteered to be the rapporteur for taking on this extra duty. We really appreciate it. I'm going to call the rapporteurs now one after the other, and I'm going to start with the rapporteur from Group 1, who is Christina O'Grady-Woods. Christina, can we hear from your group, please?
Hi, Catherine. Yeah, so point one was bureaucracy is not user-friendly or family-friendly, not easily accessible, and needs to be a one-stop shop. Public information systems need to be accessible to all. There was also a want for setting social protection payments, including the carers allowance at a level that brings people above the poverty line and supports the minimum standard of living. We also requested that job seekers get meaningful support and supporting access to childcare especially, and a process for applying for the social protection needs to be respectful and non-judgmental. Point two was the individualization of the welfare system, so that nobody is unseen in the system and everyone is accounted for and treated equally. Point three we had was that several strongly agreed that paternity leave should be mandatory and must be taken, although not everyone agreed with that. Point four, there needs to be a more scrutinized way of how the government spends our taxes. There needs to be further accountability and transparency, and taxes should benefit all of society, so there is a need for a fair tax system. Ring fencing the taxes to link the collection of the taxes with the expenditure also. For instance, road tax would need to go towards road infrastructure. And then five was just the standardization of pensions. Everyone should get the same pension of equal value once they turn 65. And that's it from Group 1.
Thank you very much, Christina. You obviously had a very busy time today coming up with all those ideas. Let's see how many of them resonated with the other groups. So in Group 2, the rapporteur is Mary Pringle, please.
Thank you, Catherine. The recommendations for Group 2 are the first one, allow people receiving carers allowance to work for more than 15 hours per week outside the home. The second was adopt fully individualised taxation and social protection system to promote a more equal division of paid work and care. The third was improve access and affordability of childcare and after school care, including spaces for parents who work non-standard hours or days due to caring responsibilities. The fourth was simplify and streamline supports using technology where appropriate in order to notify people of their entitlements and ensure the process of applying for social protection supports is respectful and non-judgmental. And the fifth one is introduce legislation on the right to request flexible working. That's it.
Thank you very much, Mary. That's very succinct. Thanks a lot. Then for Group 3, we'll be hearing from Philip Higgins, please.
Thank you, Catherine. The first one, we have 3 points here. Overhaul of the social welfare tax system, which will include single parents, guardians, divorced, separate and blended families, and to simplify the tax for the people mentioned above. A UPB, which is a universal pension benefit, to start when you start earning, with auto-enrolment and allowances for carers and childminders, a pension for all. And the third one was a tax needs to be assessed on the individual's circumstances, introduce a tax benefit for family, and to reform tax systems and bans.
Thank you very much, Philip. Then Sonia Lenihan, you're going to tell us about the discussion in Group 4, please.
So we have 5 points in Group 4. The first was implement a participation income payment, which provides a form of financial recognition and allows for collection of stamps for pensions, especially in cases of unpaid care work or voluntary work. Adopt a fully individualised social protection system with payments that lift people above the poverty line and supports a minimum standard of living. 2. Improve paid parental leave schemes by increasing time allowed to be taken and pay. Possibility for mandatory parental leave to ensure both parents avail of it, and this would need to be done with no loss of wages. 3. Make flexible working hours the norm for both men and women, including full-time or part-time remote working, which allows for the sharing of care responsibilities. Number 4, the impact of the marriage bar on women's pensions should be addressed by the relevant minister, including a discussion on being able to count the years after they were forced out of the workforce and the possibility of back pay. Number 5, childcare should be a state-funded public service available to all to ensure accessible and affordable childcare, especially for those parents who work non-standard hours and for those families living below the poverty line, allowing them to get back into the workforce.
That's great. Thank you very much, Sonia. Moving next, we come to the report from Group 5, and that's going to be made by Jane Hines.
Hi. So firstly, we agree with the idea of a universal basic income or living wage into pension years. This would be a minimum standard of income, and it would provide top-ups to income of lower paid work. It means that people can afford to live in society. Those who earn above that level can do so. And as a first step to this, those who are affected by the marriage bar can immediately be provided with this, as touched on by Mary Walsh in her video. Secondly, by default, we think that tax credits and social protection should be individualised. If a couple wish to change this, they may be transferable. And caring in the home should not be treated with any less value than other work. Thirdly, we think that auto-enrolment into pensions should occur. Our next point was that childcare is recognised as a barrier to equality, and lack of childcare services delay a return to employment. It should be a non-for-profit. It should be treated as a necessity, and costs should be tailored based on parents' income. A 4-day working week where practical would also assist parents in wider caring duties, and childcare maintenance should also be pursued with more vigour. Our final point was regarding parental leave. We think bonus parental leave should be awarded if both parents avail of maternity and paternity leave.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, another very interesting discussion. Now from Group 6, we have somebody who is a member of our steering group, and that's Greg McDowell.
I'll go through these points reasonably quickly. The first one was individualisation. There was broad agreement and support for that principle across tax, pension and social welfare. I suppose just one point to consider is just that doesn't disadvantage households where there may be only one earner in the household in particular, where that for caring reasons, where where one person might be decided for that person not to work for caring reasons. Then the next was around the broad category of flexible working, where there was a kind of, again, a broad agreement for the promotion and the right to request flexible working, which and the benefits thereof. The next point was under the caring umbrella, and again, sort of a general promotion, acknowledgement of the benefit that carers provide in society. Like one of the earlier contributors, there was a kind of agreement that this maximum number of hours of 15 should be increased before the carers allowance falls away. And then we also touched on kind of a broadening potentially of carers payment should be considered, this kind of participation income concept, and that's we'd like to be considered. The next one was, and this was maybe created a little bit of kind of debate amongst the group, was around paternity leave, and certainly one member felt that it should be up to the family to choose kind of how that is applied, albeit it was recognised, and that very much a financial driven decision if there's one parent earning more than the other, albeit recognising that might have adverse implications either for the employer or actually for the promotion of gender equality. The next point was around pensions and the concept of auto-enrolment. I think we're generally very strongly in support of that, albeit with potential opt-out, you know, depending on age or life circumstance at the time. But it should also include flexible and part-time workers. Almost finished. Jen, there was kind of under a bucket of kind of education and promotion in this segment, and kind of almost like life skills training in the context of, you know, greater awareness of taxation, pension, and some of the implications and of certain decision making that people make through their life from a tax and pension perspective, and then also, you know, greater role modeling of the things like I suppose parental care or carers should be advertised, and again just leading to a more caring society. And the final point was again one raised by one of the early contributors around a kind of a general review of the marriage bar pension implications for women. I think certainly some people in the group felt that is something that should be reviewed by the relevant minister. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Greg. I mean, I think what's interesting to hear coming out from the different groups is where there are points of agreement across groups, but also that inside groups, not everything is 100% agreed on. That shows that a real diversity of views is being engaged, and I think that's exactly the purpose. Now, by pure coincidence, our next rapporteur for Group 7 is also a member of the steering group. So, Eleanor Grace, if we can hear from you, please.
I think we were politely pushed into it in the last steering meeting, were we?
Oh, heaven forbid that. You volunteered.
Of course.
Thank you for it.
Of course, I did. I suppose in no order of importance, we noted in relation to caring work, we recommended that any and all forms of caring work of any duration should be treated as paid employment in pension terms. We noted the current setup does not appear to allow carers to better themselves through education or through meaningful additional employment. So it needs greater flexibility. Hours for education should not be limited in that sense. And also we felt home carers should be equipped to access the same training as professional carers at no additional cost, and facilitated to do so. And we also strongly felt that previous care work should be retrospectively recognised in terms of pensions too. Our second point was childcare. So to boil it down, we thought that universally available programs should be accessible regardless of income status. Pandemic has taught us that the country will be on its knees if the childcare sector fell through. So we feel that this should be highly prioritised. Our third point was around pensions. So again, a universal scheme which entitles people to a rate linked to the living wage. In 2020, 2021, there is no excuse for any person of pensionable age to be in or close to poverty. And the feedback was also that information on all supports when reaching pensionable age should be easily accessible and simple to understand. And to add to that more broadly, we feel that all forms of social protection payments should be linked to the living wage. And we stopped at that, but to add more of a side note than an additional point, we were all struck by the feedback from Cassie that in order to receive her one-parent family payment, she needs to physically turn up at the post office and rain, hail or shine to collect that. Where is the dignity in that situation? So we request that all persons availing of social protection payments have a choice of how to receive their payment in order to impart and allow as much dignity as possible. And similarly, any socially provided service should aim to be provided with the utmost dignity.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. That's extremely interesting to hear also the side note. Now, next we come to Group 8, and the rapporteur there is Alan Dean. Over to you, Alan.
The first one was to resolve historic mistakes, i.e. quote unquote the invisible women, example tax credits for women who cared in the past. Next we have women/men, so everybody basically paid for caring work with a view to contribute towards their own pension. They should be recognised via tax credits for unpaid time. Participation income is the best way to describe that point, I suppose we agreed. The third point was childcare for parents should be accessible, affordable, and a flexible approach taken. A shared care policy promotion for parents. Both parents could basically work less than full-time and achieve a better work-life balance. The next point was individual payments of people in their own right, i.e. no differentiation between men and women, taxed regardless of gender or marital status, etc. And finally, we have address specific needs of lone parents or parents with children of disability / adults that grow up into adults, obviously, in regards to supports to enable them to return to work or education. And then look at, as a side point onto that, is how does the absence of these impact on the future welfare and the welfare of the children in the state by not doing it. I kind of look into the future was our thinking on that.
Thank you very much, Alan. Now we're coming to Group 9, and we're going to hear from Adam Warren, please.
Hi, Catherine. Hi, everybody. Similar trend certainly came out of our feedback. So on our first point of recommendation, we suggested that this should be the introduction of a right to reasonable access to flexible and agile working. It was discussed that just a right may also allow the employer a right to refuse, but that the reasonable access to agile working or flexible working should be promoted and introduced. Secondly, we discussed and recommend the separating out of the marital status and individualisation of the taxation, social welfare, and the pension systems. And we concluded as a group that there was a radical upgrade required to modernise these processes or these systems in our society, to recognise the modern world, the modern country we live in. Thirdly, we discussed and recommend the parental leave that we look at an equalisation of mandatory, as it were, parental leave, and that in order to promote male caring as well. The fourth point, actually, Eleanor had mentioned as a side note, and we had sought clarification on that, whether that actually was in fact the case that lone parents would have to queue up for at the post office for this payment, and if in fact that is the case, which we have no reason to disbelieve, that any stigma-inducing elements of the process should be removed as a point of order, and we saw this as a very arguably a very quick win that just should just be facilitated for people. It shouldn't be difficult in this day and age, and we believe that most social welfare payments are in fact accessible via banking. So why there would be a difference? We found that incomprehensible. And then the fifth point that we discussed and would like to recommend on is like that the introduction of a universal basic income for the carer, whether that be directly in the home or elsewhere, but that role is recognised officially, and that it would also allow the continuation of pension contributions in terms of a non-contributory pension, and therefore promote equality within the pension system down the line. So that was our group's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. As you say, it is fascinating where the views converge, and also that there's slightly different nuances coming from one group and another. For Group 10 now, we're going to hear from Tom Slattery, please.
How you doing? So our first point is we're proposing that there's that we introduce an education piece on tax literacy in Ireland. We suggest that it should cover the collection, the use, also caring, parenting, and welfare entitlements, just to improve the tax literacy of the general public from what we agreed was a very low base. And then just similar or related to that, then we'd like to see a more user-friendly tax system introduced. Our second point was to introduce a universal basic income and auto-enrollment into a pension scheme. Our third point then was to adopt an individualised taxation system to promote more equal division of paid work and care. And that came from one of the submissions. And then our final point then is to introduce a 4-day week with the aim to redefine what work is and give more flexible working conditions.
Thank you very much, Tom. I think that's again interesting where views overlap and where there are differences. And so our final rapporteur from Group 11 is Colette Byrne. Colette, if we can hear from you now, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just to let you know that our group was mainly in agreement in everything. Our fourth recommendation is affordable childcare and accessible childcare for all, and for larger companies to be incentivized to offer childcare on site, and smaller creches being brought under state ownership if they're not viable. We also discussed maybe an insurance policy similar to the ones in the schools where parents pay €8 a year in insurance for their children. This would go some way to stop bogus insurance claims against creches and things like that. Parents are paying somewhat through their own pocket. We also discussed under that parental leave that it should benefit both parents equally. However, that is to be taking mixed parental leave, that joint and joint parent leave all comes under the one part. That can be decided between the parents on financial basis. And we also need to recognise diverse parenting skills, gender neutral skills. 2 was the participation income, joint individually assessed people. Recognise care work to be care for all family members with additional care needs, be it parents, brothers, sisters, across the board. People would need to take time off for different reasons, and that should be recognised. Part-time work needs to be recognised as a valid option for job seekers, and should have the same benefits as full-time workers with regards to sick pay, holidays, etc., etc. People that work remotely should have the same promotion opportunities as those working, say, in an office 5 days. If somebody works 3 days from home, 2 days in work, however that to be provided. Number 3, we definitely needs to be addressed now is the marriage bar, and the 100,000 women needs to be made more visible. And no person should be undocumented in the state. And the overall tax systems and pensions to be included to all workers and carers, so that we can all benefit from it. Number 4 was streamline the existing services that are there in social welfare and tax, like simpler paperwork for different things, because the system makes it so complicated for some people. So just simplify everything down. I mean, all different sections of the social care, each department can work together to simplify things instead of sending people around and about looking for different things. Number 5 was increased state-run childcare, social welfare to be index links, and lone parents should be supported financially but also educationally, and bring childcare in under state ownership. And there should be a difference, now I know we're discussing care in January, between caregivers and carers, which would be people that take care of people with additional needs. And just as a side note, we're always talking about what it's going to cost, what's going to cost the state. We'd like to just put it down that from one of the speakers that if we reduce poverty, it'll save 4.5 billion per year to the state. And also from carers, Family Carers Ireland, it's known that carers save the state over 10 billion a year, and we just want that recognised as a cost saving as opposed to always about what it's going to cost. And that's just for today. Thank you, Catherine.
Well, thank you all very much. I think there's a lot of food for thought there. And several of you have made the same point, but in almost every report there are new angles on it. So we will now go through all of this again and distill it out into the emerging compendium of recommendations that are coming from the different discussions. So thank you very much for volunteering, even under some pressure, to be the rapporteurs. We think it's important that as many people as possible, take on this role through the different sessions. And so we will, record this and put it up on the website so that everybody who was in the assembly today can see what was discussed in the groups that they were not in, and also the many observers, people outside of the assembly who are interested in seeing how it's developing, what kind of ideas are emerging. They'll also be able to tap into this rich harvest that's come out from the breakout groups. So thank you very much indeed. And I hope we'll see some of you at our meetings on either the 10th or the 14th. And if not, I hope we'll see you all back fighting fit and ready for the next round on the 16th of January. So again, very happy Christmas to you and your families, and see you in the new year. Take care. Bye-bye.